Sorry, I hope you don't mind. I'm eating this chip.
No,
I won't eat it.
no, it's cool. Enjoy your chip. Enjoy your chip.
Just don't put mayonnaise on it.
It's a Dorito.
No, today on the morning show, we have a chill morning show here, and I was paid to eat mayo. Like,
Oh, you have never eaten the mayo?
No, like, squeeze mayo in my mouth.
Out of date.
It was out of date. So that's why. You'll see.
I would never.
Yeah.
For money.
I did become a little bit of a cam hole this morning.
Servant to the shekels. I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
So I've read that if we look back to like 2005, that the Bush regime was even planning the situation in Syria for the removal. Now, I know that we could go back to PNAC and maybe even the Oded Yinon plan and all that, but is it true that the idea of the removal of Assad was kind of being discussed in the Bush regime back in like 2005, I think?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I remember after the Iraq war, the US actually came to Syria and said, "You're next, so you better give up chemical weapons." This was in 2004.
Yeah.
And Syria's response to that was, you know what? We'll give up chemical weapons if everyone in the region gives up chemical weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And they put in this, statement to the UN saying everyone in the region should give up chemical weapons, which includes Israel. And of course, the US vetoed that.
Right.
They came and they brought the same proposition to Libya, and Gaddafi fell for it, and he chose to give up his chemical weapons, and the rest is history. So it was planned. It's been planned all along. I mean, these people have long-term plans.
And it's because, like you were saying, with the oil, like it's resource rich. That's a big part of it, right?
Yeah, well, you know what? In my view, it's not so much the fact that they want the oil to make money off it. I think they want the oil so that Syria can't have it, and Syria can't make money off it, and then Syrian people can't prosper. Because the US is one of the biggest oil producers in the world. Right. It doesn't need Syria's oil.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do feel that it's more to do. I'm sure profit is a part of it for some people.
Right, but not just
power is the. Yeah. I don't know, how serious is your show? Like, is it a very serious show?
Well, no, it's serious, but you could say whatever you want. Like, it doesn't have to be super serious if you don't want to. But we do dive into these topics too. So yeah, definitely.
Because that T-shirt is hilarious, and I wanted.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead. What does it say?
Because it's like they're feminine, but instead of feminine, they're felines.
Wait, did you say grab me?
And the future is feline.
How dangerous though is it having a shirt like that when you're walking down the street and it says "grab me" on your tip? Isn't that like bad?
It says don't grab me.
So it's like it said it on her shirt though.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a cat, and another word for cat is
pussy. There we go.
There you go.
There we go. Yeah, no, on this show you could say whatever you want, definitely. But on I watched your video, the one you did on Paul Joseph Watson's channel, or maybe he mirrored your video on Syria and World War III, right? Do you want to give people who don't know about you what you were saying, like your theory? Or I won't even say theory, like what you see the evidence points to that America is actually in there to antagonize Syria to eventually start World War III. Do you want to give everyone like a brief rundown? If you want to eat your chip, go ahead first. You can eat your chip before. Yeah, no, it's all good.
Yeah, we're not filming yet, are we?
Huh?
We're not filming yet, so.
We are totally live right now.
No, you're kidding. That's off air.
Oh my God. Sorry, we should have totally said. You said nothing horrific. Don't worry. I just thought you were on a roll talking about this, so I thought you knew.
No.
Yeah. We did the first.
I know what we'll do.
Sorry,
I know
now
what
I
we'll do.
feel bad about eating chips in front of people.
No, it's cool. I just thought, this chick's just comfortable. All right, cool, whatever. I'm not gonna say anything about it.
So,
No, fair
I know how to solve this. I know how to solve this. All we have to do is re-upload this, and we'll just mute her entire part, and I will talk over her in a weird female voice.
So everyone knows what my T-shirt's all about now.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's all cool. See, that's how chill this show is. You so you didn't even think we were live.
It says off air at the top of the
I'm running this through OBS, right? So I'm capturing the video.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
But everyone's laughing in the chat. Don't worry. That they all think that was funny. It's all good. Oh shit. Yeah. So if you want to give everyone, because everyone is watching, a brief rundown on your thoughts on Syria and what America is doing to Syria.
Okay, as you talked about the Oded Yinon plan, it talked about divide and conquer, basically. Dividing Syria into a Kurdish region, but also they wanted to divide the coast, like the Alawite coast, make a section there, and the Druze section in the south. That was the plan, and Al-Qaeda was supposed to help with that plan, basically by slaughtering everyone who was Druze or Alawite or Christian, and driving those people to want to have a separate state, which would then balkanize Syria and cause everyone else in Syria to starve, because all those regions are where all the water and oil is and the food. Mm-hmm. So the point of that, of course, is it helps Israel. And now at the moment, where the US is occupying is the northeast of the country. And that's where 80% of the oil is, east of the Euphrates. And if you were watching the news, there was a mad rush to the oil fields as well. Back when ISIS was getting wiped out in the east, between the US and Syria. And of course, Syria does have, the US does still want regime change. They still have this intention to destroy Syria. We've only limited the amount that of damage that they've done, but they are attacking the Syrian army. And if you look at current map of Syria, if you look at down, is a city called Abu Kamal. It's on the Syrian-Iraqi border. That city is extremely important because that connects Syria and Iraq. And one of the things that they said that they plan to do, this was in the WikiLeaks leaks, even in Clinton emails, was to divide that. The fact that ISIS is there, or even a Kurdish state, is useful because it will divide Syria and Iraq. But the Syrian military actually beat the US to the Abu Kamal border crossing. And they met up with Iraqi troops there. And so if you look closely, the US has left an ISIS pocket there, east of the Euphrates, in order to harass the Syrian military in that border crossing. And every now and then there's, airstrikes to up the ante, to try to push Assad into negotiations. The Kurdish thing as well in the US media, it's being promoted as, these poor people, they were victimized everywhere and they are stateless and they deserve their own state. They deserve their own ethnocentric state. But if you think about it, that's exactly the argument they made for the creation of Israel. And the same, story is that the Kurds in Syria, who are the Kurds? There's this meme or propaganda they're pushing that Sykes-Picot divided forgot about the Kurds when they were cutting up these countries. That's not the story. And another meme is these countries are an invention of Sykes-Picot. After the end of the First World War, the Syrians got together and they made their own nation called the Arab Kingdom of Syria. And France then invaded, sorry, that's Syria. Every time I say Syria, it thinks.
It's all good.
So France came in and it destroyed that state. That state happened to include Palestine. So, Syria put up a resistance, and we have like a hero that died, Yusuf al-Azma, his statues in Damascus, because he basically got all of his troops to, knowing that they would all die, like resist the French occupation. So, these states have a very long history. Syria has been Syria for thousands of years. Right. We all know Damascus is one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world. The maps have been drawn up. The history of the Kurdish people, however, they don't. There's no like cities or civilizations that they can be traced back to, because what they do trace back to is Iran. Because like Saudi Arabia has Bedouins, Iran too has Bedouins, and those Bedouins, the nomads of Iran, are the Kurds. This is, in saying this, again, they'll use like a racism card against me, but it's on Wikipedia. I mean, it's even on Wikipedia. It's known knowledge. BBC talked about it too. I mean, up until 50 years ago, many of them were still living a nomadic life. And they came from the Zagros Mountains of Iran. They followed the mountain range because they tended goats, and they wanted to follow the Euphrates River because of, obviously, it was fertile. And that's how come they spread into Iraq and Turkey. And, at the time in Turkey, they were in the 1910s still living a nomadic life. But the east of Turkey, there was a historical state called Armenia that was taken by the Ottoman Empire. And we all know what happened there, the Armenian. And who took part and helped in that Armenia? It was the Kurdish tribes that were living there. Because the Turkish government actually said, like, you could have the homes of the people that you kill. And sadly, a lot of people took it up on that. And that's how come a lot of the Armenians were pushed into this tiny pocket of, now what used to be Armenia, now the Kurds are claiming is their historic ancestral land in East Turkey. But then, after that, they decided to declare their own state. And Turkey started saying, oh, well, you know what? We shouldn't have empowered you, Kurds. Now we're going to kill you too. And as a result, there was waves and waves of insurrections against Turkey. And what happened? The Kurds became refugees in the north of Syria. This was like in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 60s. Like there was different waves of them with every insurrection. And now they make up like 40% of the area that they're claiming is historically Kurdish and belongs to the Kurds in the east of the Euphrates. They're not even a majority of that area. They're a plurality because there are many, many minorities there. Christian Assyrians, Bedouins, Turkmens, and Kurds. But they still want to make this ethnocentric state for Kurds because it helps Israel. Sorry, I'm rambling.
No. It's interesting.
Ethnic homogeneity is selectively allowed, right?
Yeah, there's echo. Yeah, test.
And it's somehow only like acceptable for a group that is nomadic or is stateless or doesn't have any historical buildings or civilizations on that land. And when saying that, I'm talking about Israel, because Israel, of course, if you read the Torah, it's basically a book of about 12 nomadic tribes that walked around in order to get to the Promised Land. And of course, Israel is composed of, you could say, refugees or illegal immigrants from around the world who wanted to create, you could either an ethnocentric state or a religious state, but it's actually both. And it's funny because nobody would find this concept acceptable in America. Imagine if someone said, I want to create a state for whites or blacks or Mexicans separated from everyone else in America. Imagine if someone's even so much as suggested that. But if they suggest it in the Middle East, everyone's all for it.
Well, we've had people on this show before suggest that and give their reasons. We've had debates, Richard Spencer, like people like that who do want the white ethno state, though, to have that. We've always talked about this being a pipe dream. It's very difficult. Like, you're not going to pay off people to leave or kick them out. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm just saying because we have talked about that before. Yeah.
Oh, well, we're definitely not the mainstream media here.
Yeah, exactly.
So I have a question. So along these same lines, I remember Hillary, she wrote an op-ed about Assad as human rights violator. This is a meme, a trope that we see constantly touted. This is what they did with Saddam, right? So, oh, the human rights thing. But yet, at the same time, if we think back to Gaddafi in Libya, it was in Hillary's emails that it needed to be targeted. The Gaddafi in Libya needed to be targeted because he had gold. You know, amazingly, it's in her emails that she's like, yeah, I want the gold. Give me the gold. I want the gold, right? Like that rap song, right? So, I mean, is that kind of, it's just a repeated pattern of the same thing over and over and over with Syria too, right?
It is part of this bigger thing, as you said. I don't know if we were live when you said it, but 7 nations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that thing. So they wanted to basically wipe out any country that didn't have a global central, world central bank. Libya didn't have one. Libya wanted to create, instead of like the euro, but an African equivalent. And he wanted to create an African Union economy. And that would have helped a lot of African countries, especially in the sub-Saharan Africa. And that's not going to suit much of the businesses inside Europe who, to this day, France gets a tax from Africa for their occupation. I mean, some African countries, I'm not all of them, but also they want basically life in Africa to be not great because they want to take Africa's a resources rich place. Right. They want to take the resources and they want to create cheap labor in the form of illegal immigration.
We talked about
globalization. That's globalization. So
weapons of mass migration, right?
Yes, and I think what globalization means at the end of the day is to break down all borders and have no basic, like one global power. And the means by which to do that is to make everywhere look exactly the same. So while, there is an argument for having states with a culture, with borders, because that seems to be the natural tendency as we are. And I'm not advocating for anything inorganic, no forcing of an ethno-state and no forcing of breaking down borders. That's not an organic way for things to happen. And that's definitely going to lead to violence and chaos.
Well, another question I have too that I've touched on in some interviews with people I've done on Syria is, do you think there's an iconoclastic element to going after Syria? What I mean is in the sense of wrecking areas that have very traditional cultures. I mean, as you mentioned, Syria, we think of in the Bible, St. Paul's in Damascus, right? This is a central idea to Christianity. And it's also central to other religions. And as you said, this is thousands of years of culture in Syria. Is there an aspect to wiping out, not just and moving the people group, but dozing over this whole traditional culture?
Absolutely. And I think one of the steps you take to destroy a nation state is to destroy its history.
Yeah.
And that's what Israel has been doing to Palestine. You hear one of these lines, Palestine never existed. Never mind that one of the first presidents of Israel, Golda Meir, actually had Palestinian citizenship and admitted that. So yeah, it's about wiping out history, and the Romans did it to Carthage. I'm pretty sure that they said something along the lines of, "We will not only destroy you, we'll destroy any trace that you ever existed." So they used ISIS to that end by destroying, a lot of our artifacts in Palmyra. And also the Al-Qaeda rebels inside Damascus, recently they were caught with one of the most ancient Torah scrolls in the world, which was in Damascus. They were caught trying to sell it in Turkey by the Turkish police. Now, I don't know if Syria is going to get that back or if it's going to end up in some museum in New York or Israel. Because that's exactly what happened with Iraq. In the first few days of the Iraq war, all the museums were ransacked, and much of the Babylonian artifacts that were taken some of them ended up in New York, Israel, places in Europe too. That was also planned. It wasn't an accident. It was very efficient targeting. And it is about destroying a culture, because Syria is, like, having traveled to many countries around the world, it's very, very insular and isolated, especially economically. And also the people, like not many people want to immigrate to Syria because there's not really that much money there. So it's quite a homogenous society, in spite of like thousands of years of history. You know, people can be, usually it was people from around the area that immigrated in. It wasn't like people from across the world would go in there because they didn't really have a reason to. But yeah, so for that reason, we had our own companies for everything. We made our own medicine. We made 95% of our own medicine. The only thing that we didn't finish off was a lot of the cancer drugs, which have a patent. And we had plans to do that. And now, like, the chemistry infrastructure is completely destroyed and kids are dying of cancer in Syria. We had, like, our own cola companies, clothing, you name it. And a lot of those factories were ransacked in Aleppo. So I guess the idea is to force Syria to be a nation that has to outsource its products, have a H&M and a McDonald's and, everything like globalized, like I see in Europe. Because it was kind of disappointing traveling to Europe, seeing that everywhere pretty much looked exactly the same. And in the city center, I go into any of the clothing shops and it's always H&M and they have the exact same products. So why even travel, So it's not it's definitely, and this, maybe people agree with globalization or not, but whether you agree with it or not, the result, the way that they achieve it is through war. And that results in mass immigration. And people think, oh, these immigrants, they are really happy to leave their homes and they can become rich in the West, etc. The worst thing about being an immigrant is not being able to see your family all in one place. Everyone is scattered now around the world. If I wanted to visit my family, whereas I would have gone to Syria and seen them all in one place, now I have to go to 5 different places. So it's really destroying families as well.
No, in fact, one of the top globalists, the French Kissinger, I just did a giant analysis of his book, Jacques Attali, Brief History of the Future. He makes your very point. He says that the future of globalism is to make everybody nomadic so that they're basically just servants of some Fortune 100 company, and you're going to move like 20 times in your life just to make a living. So you're absolutely spot on.
This is
Globalism
absolutely
is a giant wrecking
unbelievable,
ball.
by the way. This is crazy. See, I'm more of a layman type dude, if you don't know me, and
Sure.
I do like buy into certain things in the media. Obviously, I wasn't opening my eyes or doing more research or any of that stuff, but like from my perspective of someone who doesn't know, like or who didn't know what you're saying right now. Like, I see it as, ISIS is over there. We have to stop Syria. We have to, that's me as someone who just sees what I see on the media, and I don't do the research, because the way I perceive it is just constant war there, tanks rolling around, people hiding in basements and shit, and then being like, oh, America's just heading there to help them, But now you're saying all this, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm living under a fucking rock, like that.
Well, I had no idea. That it was, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just like from my perspective, obviously,
It's important to get that, because I think that's the majority view, unfortunately. And even like after doing this for 5 years, I've gained people who know better now. And of course, like multiple wars in the US has woken people up. But it's funny because during the Iraq War, there was millions and millions of people around the world protesting the start of the Iraq War. And I was among those people. But now the anti-war movement has died. Libya was almost non-existent. And it seems that even though people wake up sometimes, the media's propaganda arm is just so strong that it can put you right back to sleep sometimes if you're not careful, if you're not constantly vigilant. So I don't blame you at all. I don't blame people at all. But unfortunately, you basically have to be constantly vigilant, because nobody realizes that, I don't know if you realize, tell me if you know, that the US has been giving weapons and arms and funding to Al-Qaeda. And
that I've heard, yes.
Yeah,
that I've heard.
Trump said it, didn't he, during his election? He hasn't said it since. but
well,
there's mounds of evidence for it.
well, I know it's probably just out of ignorance, and like, but like I always knew that there's some sort of a corruption, right? But for me, it's sort of I don't know. I don't know who to believe, what evidence to believe, because so much shit is just thrown at you constantly with the media. But when I watched your video today on the World War III potentially starting, which I want to ask you about as well, like I was like, wait, what? Like it literally it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh shit, like there's a whole other angle of this that I haven't been looking at. So this is really intriguing. Like this is absolutely insane. Because I remember hearing one of the interviews, I think it was on CNN. It was viral for a while, where they interviewed someone, a refugee from Syria. And then literally he just starts going off. He's like, do you think I want to leave here? You think I want to leave my country? No, I want to stay here. He's like, America is just fucking it all up. Like, I don't like, and he went off, and then CNN was like, oh, pull the plug because, because someone's saying something that like they expected him to be like, yeah, we're going to go to the West. And he was getting pissed, and they ended up like, I don't know if you saw that clip. It was actually really.
I didn't. That sounds amazing, but it sounds like a lot of Syrians I know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this kid here that is constantly drawing the Syrian flag wherever he goes. Like, he's traumatized because he had to leave his country. But it's interesting because I also saw on the other side of this, Whoopi Goldberg, she made basically a nice video about how she got this refugee family and took them around New York and showed them the Statue of Liberty. And this family's like, oh, cool, free trip. And, it's a nice day. And they interviewed them. But then, her voiceover and what she's saying is like, these people just want the American dream and like, let's give them liberty and etc. So basically, these refugees have become an advertising campaign for how great America is and how everybody wants to live there. So it's very exploitive in that sense. Because if you really ask them, they probably say, yeah, I want to go home. Like, please stop the war, stop funding Al-Qaeda.
Actually,
that would be great.
It all makes sense, because I remember seeing like this picture of like a line of refugees, and they're all wearing like nice clothes and shit. And I'm like, what? This is weird. Like I imagine they're all wearing, like a blanket over their head, like, like, all tattered wear, like potato bags basically. And then I'm like, they're all wearing like, I'm pretty sure she's wearing fucking designer shoes right now. What the hell?
Yeah. I saw this stuff going around like, why do the refugees have smartphones? Then they definitely don't need our help because they have smartphones. But yeah, everybody has smartphones these days. So, like, the idea that they're going to to America so they can have an iPhone. That's but the thing is, the refugees, they're not all from Syria. They're not all coming to Europe for the same reasons. Some people are running away because their entire livelihoods were destroyed and they need like some place to be because they don't have a home. And other people are going there because the war has created an economic situation in their country, and so they're taking the opportunity to leave. So there is like, every story is different, and of course only like 40%, as far as I know, or 30% of the refugees in Europe are Syrian refugees. But of course there's been so many wars over the last 10 years that like the other half of them are from Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, and Sudan. So all of those countries that the US has been, of course there's gonna be refugees created, because during the Iraq war, 2 million refugees from Iraq came to Syria, and Syria was housing them. And then when the Syrian war started, where did you think they were going to go? And then ISIS surged in Iraq as well. So you were saying about World War III, just to get back to that quickly. Yeah. There's people always, there's some faction of people that make fun of this because they think that World War III is never going to happen. It's not possible. And they live in that false sense of security, because obviously countries, they do something called brinkmanship, which is a game of chicken, where each country threatens the other and keeps upping the ante until one of them backs down. Russia and the US do this. You can see North Korea and the US do this all the time. So it's about nuclear brinkmanship, and the one who has the most nukes and can destroy the most territory is probably going to have the upper hand in that game. However, the game can stop being a game in an instant if someone really feels like there's no other way. Because if you push someone so far into the corner, as Russia is being pushed now, with basically these US bases all around it, it's getting sanctioned, etc., etc. And the only base that Russia has in the Middle East happens to be in Syria. That's the only connection it has to the Mediterranean Sea. When you're, keep pushing someone into a corner, they might just snap, and then you're going to have World War III on your hands. This is a very volatile situation because you have the US and Russia and Turkey and France. They're all against each other, and Iran, Syria, Israel. They're all in the same theater of war, which unfortunately happens to be my country. But if they come to blows in a bigger way, it's like having a fuse that could be ignited at any time, and you're using that fuse as like a hostage to force the other person to negotiate. Doesn't mean it won't go off. And the fact that Israel and Syria are fighting, there's different ways that a regional war can happen. There could be a regional war that starts between Syria and Israel, which grows into Syria, Iran and Israel, which grows into Saudi Arabia, taking Israel's side. That's another thing I have to mention. It's ironic that they say that they hate Islamic countries, while Israel is actually helping Al-Qaeda on the Syrian border with medical aid. And they have good relations right now with Saudi Arabia, basically under the table. So, because Saudi Arabia hates Iran because they're Shiite and all this religious mumbo jumbo. So, yes, basically, you could have a regional war expanded to the Middle East, which then can expand again to a larger war. That is something that not just me is like, I'm not only the one saying that. Many of the world's experts are saying that we're closer now to World War III than we have ever been, even in the Cold War.
I am so scared right now. Wow, that is absolutely insane. Where do you think it will start? Like what do you think would trigger? Like, what would be the first instance of like, all right, yo, it starts right now?
There's many possibilities. People talk about the South China Sea. That conflict between that conflict of the South China Sea, I feel, includes Korea. That's a potential ignition for World War III. That little strip of ocean between Turkey and Russia, if it basically Turkey controls this little piece of ocean that would, if they block it off, it would prevent Russia from entering into the Mediterranean. That's one of the things that could spark World War III. One of the other things was Crimea and Ukraine, because if you read a little bit about the history of it, Russia signed the end of the Cold War treaty with Warsaw dissolving, and NATO is supposed to have been dissolved, but it didn't. They signed it with NATO saying that Ukraine is to remain a neutral country. No, Ukraine cannot join NATO. That's one of the rules. And of course, they still did a regime change on Ukraine and tried to take the whole thing, and Russia, kept Crimea. So that is one of the potential ignition points. Syria is clearly now the biggest ignition point that you can see, because it's like Russia's basically the distance between Syria and Russia is extremely small. Like, you could an hour's flight or less to get from Syria to Russia. So if you compare that to the distance to the United States, it's astronomical. So they call it like the southern front of Russia, basically, because if Syria falls, then all of these jihadis are going to move on to the next target, which is going to be Chechnya and the Caucasus in Russia. It's going to break them apart. And Russia will lose its Mediterranean base in Syria. and they're pushing it into a corner. I think the long-term objective is to destroy Russia. The sanctions against it is for that reason, because they're hoping that if they can starve people enough, that they can cause an insurrection. And that's a very dangerous thing to do with a nuclear power. So if it's going to start anywhere, it's probably going to be Syria.
I was going to ask you about Ukraine and Crimea, because what triggered that coup was essentially snipers, and you had which obviously I think were kind of black op type situations, to then trigger protests, and then if the government responded, then it was called like human rights violations. And weren't there snipers at the beginning of the most recent aspect of the Syrian situation? Weren't snipers hitting people in the crowd to cause?
Well, you know how, yeah, and you know how we know that there's a agent provocateur. Yeah. Other than the fact that we actually have videos of them, there was in Ukrainian police that were shot and hit and killed by snipers. Same as in Syria. In Jisr al-Shughur, in the first 3 months of the entire thing, where the media tells you it was a peaceful protest,
right?
You know, there was like a massacre in Jisr al-Shughur where like 15, 17 soldiers were killed. And there's never been any explanation for that. Mm-hmm. But if you compare that to like the coverage on what's happening in the Gaza Strip right now and the West Bank in Palestine, they say, oh, well, those protesters are violent. But how many Israeli soldiers have died from those protests? 0. So like with Ukraine and Syria, you can prove that there was gunfire and police dying. You know, but of course, Israel likes to flip things around and accuse other countries of being human rights violators, and the US goes along with it because US Congress is controlled by Israel.
To what degree do you think democracy is weaponized? This is something I've talked about in a lot of podcasts and lectures, is the fact that Brookings Institute and the National Endowment for Democracy and these open society, Soros stuff, it's all a facade, and they sell democracy as if they're actually bringing, you know, freedom, but democracy is just a cover for essentially globalism.
Yeah, absolutely. Democracy, as they call it, supposed to be the will of the people, but when the US applies it to other countries, they really just mean the will of the globalists and hegemony. Right. Because you know, it's weaponized in many different ways. The first being that when you're a small country that has its borders being threatened by an entity such as Israel that wants to expand its borders, and for North Korea, I guess it's South Korea. But the standard thing that you do is you start emergency law. And that's why you have dictatorships that are very isolated in countries that are threatened, because they basically have an excuse. Like, the problem with the democracy for a weak country is that the minute it tries to do something for its own interest, a more powerful country comes in there and switches the leadership. That's why they want democracies everywhere in these countries, because they want to be able to flip any guy that isn't towing the line.
Right.
That's what democracy means in the world at the moment. And of course, they use it to claim that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, etc., etc. So that it's weaponized in that way as well.
Yeah, I mean,
fascinating.
You go back to Plato, and Plato said, you know, democracy was just a tool of moneyed oligarchy, and so it's always been the same.
What about republics? Because the US is not a democracy; it's supposed to be a republic, which means that the right of the individual is supposed to be enshrined in the constitution. That's the difference between a republic and a democracy. And it's very curious why you never really hear that in the media. It's always democracy, democracy, democracy.
Yeah, no, that's because it was actually intentionally chosen to be a reframing of what America was. You could argue that the Rand Corporation was a big part of that in terms of reframing what it meant to be American. The Rand Corporation was a big part of designing how these kinds of wars would go down. For example, they drew up the plans for the televising of Desert Storm. So it's also Rand that would be involved in how the regime changes would occur in Syria, Libya, Iraq. And it goes back to their idea of soft power of sparking coups, sparking regime change, using the black ops snipers type stuff, and swarming, right? The swarming technique of mobs, Arab Spring, that's all kind of out of the Rand Corporation.
Absolutely. And I was wondering if we could get into genie energy as well. Basically to do with the Golan Heights, because it's very topical at the moment.
And he doesn't believe in genies. He says there's no God, there's no magic, no genie. So it's up to him.
No, for sure. No, look. This is actually someone in the chat was funny. They're just like, take a shot every time Andy's mind is blown, because you can't see, but like live right now, Syrian girl, I'm on camera, right?
Are you kidding us?
No, I swear to God,
no,
this is absolutely. I didn't know. How did I miss this? Did I not get the memo? Oh my God. No, cause I'm in this like, this like bubble sometimes with like the media and what's, like the way the news is presented. So like, I'm not like, if I was bored as fuck, I wouldn't probably like respond or talk. But if you see me live right now, I'm literally, whenever I'm on camera, I'm just like, what? But I can't put the camera on the hangout.
Genie energy must sound like mumbo jumbo to you until we explain it a bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that like you'll say a word like goes over my head, and if I stopped you every time.
Oh, it's an oil and gas company.
Oh, okay, yeah, that. Thank you for explaining that.
Don't be too blown away about it.
No, I mean just everything in general. I'm telling you, like I'm like, what? Everyone's saying, I'm bubble boy now. Anyway, sorry, this is fucking
no problem.
This is awesome. This is excellent.
Yeah, I'm really happy to give anyone information that expands their ideas. So Genie Energy is a company, Israeli oil and gas company that is illegally sucking Syrian oil and gas out of the Golan Heights, which Israel illegally occupies. It's Syrian land. There's Syrians still living on it, and they've been separated from their families for 40 years. And Israel has basically occupied this place and built its own stuff on there. So this is important because this is a big part of the war. The fact that Israel wants the United Nations and the world to no longer say that that land belongs to Syria and say that now it belongs to Israel and they can suck the oil out legally, even though they're doing it illegally now anyway. So this ties into the whole Jerusalem thing, because if you recognize, like the US, international law deemed Palestine, Jerusalem to be not Israel. It was supposed to be mostly either a neutral zone for all religions or part of a Palestinian state, because that's how they drew up the map in 1948 when they were creating this ethnocentric state. But Israel has been expanding ever since 1948, and they've been building illegal settlements, and some of the illegal settlements they built was in Jerusalem, and it happened to encroach on very ancient churches that were there as well. And the thing is, like, Israel is painted as this democracy that's nice to everyone. Israel is, after the US decided to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, even though it's like somebody else's city, it's not even part of their country, supposedly, they prevented Palestinian Christians from the Gaza Strip from going to Jerusalem to pray in churches in Easter. And if you really pay attention to what's happening, Palestinian Christians are being just as much ethnically cleansed as Palestinian Muslims. They're burning the very Jewish extremists who basically feel that Israel, Palestine, the whole area should be Jews only, are burning churches, they're vandalizing churches, they're even it's sanctioned by the state. I mean, they say, oh, these are just some crazies. During the Easter procession, one of these Palestinian Christians dared to pull out a Palestinian flag, and the Israeli state, the military and police just crashed into the whole thing and broke up the entire Palm Sunday celebration. And there's video of it online. So this Trump giving, not giving, because it doesn't belong to Trump for him to give. That's what the Pope said, like Jerusalem doesn't belong to you. So he, by acknowledging that or recognizing Jerusalem as part of Israel, he's empowered this group of people. And now Congress is talking about recognizing the Golan Heights as part of Israel. And of course, Syria is never going to abandon its rights to its land and to try to get back the Golan Heights. So it's basically putting us on a war footing with America for a very, very long time. And the Syrian president said, we will regain or restore every inch of Syrian land. And the media went crazy when he said that. They were very angry about that statement.
Jeez. Just about like what the media does say about Syria. There are, pockets of ISIS and all that stuff in Syria, right?
Well, yes, there's still pockets of ISIS in Syria, but they've mostly been destroyed by the Syrian army, Iran, and Russia. The biggest ISIS pocket right now is where the American area is. They're keeping it alive near the Iraqi border. Also, in Damascus right now, there is Yarmouk, that is an ISIS pocket, and at the bottom of Damascus, like south of Damascus in Dara, is an ISIS pocket. So if you can look now on Syria live maps and see where the ISIS pockets are. So when Syria started its offensive in Dara, which is south of the Syrian border, that's when Israel started attacking Syria inside the Golan Heights. So that sort of gives you the indication that they don't want ISIS to be defeated in those areas. They want the war to continue for as long as possible to cause Syria as much damage as possible. And there are still ISIS pockets. And there's Al-Qaeda. See, that's the thing that the media doesn't tell you. It's always talk about ISIS. But there's also Al-Qaeda. In Damascus, in Aleppo, those places were run by Al-Qaeda. And those were the places that the US was constantly saying, we need to support these rebel groups that are beheading people. Now those groups are all in Idlib. So we still have Al-Qaeda in Idlib, and we still have ISIS pockets everywhere else.
So they're obviously picking specific areas where they want to control and not going directly where they know ISIS is, which looks sketchy.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
How is no one talking about this? Like, I know you are, obviously, and that video you did on Paul Joseph Watson's channel, that was mirrored from your channel, right?
Yeah, actually, Paul asked me to create that video for his channel.
Nice,
yeah,
nice.
It's very, very cool of him to do that.
Yeah, awesome. I have all of her links, by the way, down there below if you want to check out her YouTube. So definitely.
Yes, please check out my channel. I had many videos on there, but I had to put them on private because my channel was attacked by censorship. So yeah, I will slowly be making them public, and of course I'm making new videos, so I would please very much appreciate anyone to subscribe.
Yeah,
my goal is 100,000.
Nice. I mean, and also being on InfoWars, and like I'm sure that was a huge boost for your channel too, right?
Yeah, thank God for InfoWars. They really helped Syria a lot to get the word out about what's happening with Obama and Hillary supporting Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and then the continuation of their policy with Donald Trump, even though he claimed he wasn't going to do regime change wars anymore. So, yes, thank God that they gave us an open platform. Of course, we don't agree with everything that we think, but at least we have the respect for each other to, I can't complain that I was given a platform. And since I have you guys here, I was wondering if you wanted to talk about what's happening, or if maybe we already talked about it. Stop me if we have, but if you wanted to get into Gaza or the West Bank, I know we mentioned it already.
Sure.
Is there any questions you have, or is there any other questions you have re politics?
Well, I still have steam in me. How about you, Jay?
Yeah. I mean, I do have a lot of questions, but if there's something that you want to get to, go ahead.
I just real fast. May I just
I just
say one
wanted to-
thing? Sorry. I just want to say one thing. I
Sure.
want to thank the Bad Virus who threw, and we will read super chats as well. Don't worry. But this is. I don't want to interrupt her, and it's very intriguing. But the big one here, the Bad Virus threw 50 pounds to say, isn't it true that the West, and this was before you even started talking, so it's pretty much a summary of what you were just talking about. He says, isn't it true that the West have been brainwashed by Israeli propaganda for several decades that has caused us to go to war with much personal and financial expense, like 9/11, Israel benefited, Iraq war, Israel benefited, and so on. And that was before you were even talking about that. So yeah, that.
Well, it's not a coincidence that most, or in fact, almost all of the countries that have been attacked and destroyed had basically no relation, or they were against Israel. Syria doesn't recognize Israel's existence because we think that, and it's in fact true, that Israel is just the Jewish ISIS. So why would we recognize a Jewish ISIS or a Muslim ISIS as a state on our land? Iraq didn't recognize it. Libya didn't. In fact, Gaddafi called for and I love this idea, one state, Israel and Palestine joined together, but it's a secular state where it's not a religious state. So the idea of a Jewish state wouldn't be there. Everybody would be equal citizens, whether they be Christian, Muslim, or Jewish. And of course, he was laughed at for that and then subsequently killed. And here's the interesting one. North Korea. North Korea doesn't recognize the existence of Israel either. And it's not a coincidence that AIPAC, the Zionist lobby, is constantly pushing for war, as they're pushing now for war with Iran and Syria. And Netanyahu, who he actually went to Congress and he told Americans that if they were to go into the Iraq war and destroy Iraq, that it would have positive consequences for the region. This was, so it is, these wars are being fought for Israel because, there's two sides of the argument. And I've also, had to think about this a lot. Jay, you said, is it the Israeli dog wagging the U.S. tail? Well, you didn't use those words, but you said, is it the U.S. that's using Israel as a satellite? Or is Israel controlling the U.S.? It's connected. Sometimes I think maybe it's just the people who want an empire who are using Israel as well. Because if you look at it in that sense, if someone out there wants to divide the Middle East into different ethnicities and religions, Shiite, Sunni, Alawite, etc., the first thing they started that with was creating a Jewish state. And that pulled the Jews that were historically in Iran. Well, Iran, actually, the Jews stayed in Iran, thankfully. There's like 100,000 Jews there still. But Syria, Iraq, Yemen, all those Jewish people that have been there for thousands of years, they pulled them into one place. And maybe the wars of the promotion of Wahhabism and ISIS and Al-Qaeda is sort of pushing for more and more of these divisions in the Middle East.
Yeah,
you can look at it that way. But last thing, like the other way to look at it is sometimes the US does things where I'm like, that's not even in their benefit. Like there's, for example, the Kurdistan, by doing that, they are basically destroying their relationship with Turkey. And Turkey is a very powerful NATO ally, one of the biggest militaries in NATO. So why would the US destroy its ally for some ragtag communist militia? And I guess the only answer is Israel. So it's at times like that I think that this is a bit strange.
Yeah.
I think in fact it is the Zionist lobby in control. What do you think, Jay? What's your view?
Well, I come from the vantage point of looking at.
Yeah, there's an echo. Who's test? I think it. Wait. Hello? Okay. It stopped. It also just real fast. Max 15 with 100 pounds. Jesus.
Whoa.
Says Andy, please consider wrenching at Booberly. We need her. I will wrench her. She's a great mod. All right. Cool. Sorry.
What does that mean?
Oh, it's moderators in the chat who like.
Oh.
people who spam, they can like time out and stuff. But it was £100
Ah.
donations. I just wanted to stop for a second. Thank you. And if you're enjoying this stream, hit like. And yeah, sorry, Jake, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I tend to take the imperial perspective just because a lot of the books that I've read were written by guys who were analyzing it from the British Empire perspective, and then later kind of like the Atlanticist CFR, Council on Foreign Relations perspective. So I've read a whole bunch of those works, and I do a lot of lectures on that stuff. And they always portrayed Israel as like a satellite, an outpost that would give the West, originally the British Empire, kind of control an area. Because what the Brits wanted to do was also control Mecca. So that was a big part of this, why they were so favorable to the Sauds, was they thought that could be a way to control Mecca, and then a large portion.
Maybe they do.
Exactly. No, I think so. That's the essence of the Western power bloc is Saudi Arabia, Israel, the UK, and the US. So to me, it seems like a globalist empire that's essentially just sort of wrecking balling all of the other cultures. Definitely Israel is important in that region, but we see kind of the same game plan rolled out globally, or at least that's the attempt, that is to roll all this stuff out globally. One question I have for you, though, is that something that's always been kind of difficult for me to understand is, I remember reading a lot of works on the history of British intelligence and them using Muslim Brotherhood and things like this in different books, like Mark Curtis or Robert Dreyfuss have written books on that. And then you see this older plan where the CIA, like back in the 40s, they were favorable to Arab nationalism and pan-Arabism. And then you see this shift in the 60s and 70s where the U.S. starts to adopt the older British model of supporting Wahhabism, jihad, Salafists. It becomes very evident, especially by 1979 with Robert Gates and Jimmy Carter and Brzezinski setting up, what would become Al-Qaeda, and always a tool and a puppet of the West and the CIA. So I'm wondering, why do you think there was this shift away from Arab nationalism over to this jihadi view?
I think it probably had to do with the USSR. So there's the divide and conquer aspect of it. Sorry. So there's the divide and conquer aspect of it, getting religions to fight amongst each other. If you promote Wahhabis in Saudi Arabia and around the Middle East, you'll get them to attack Iran, and suddenly you've got Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iran war on your hands, and then you can sell them both weapons. So everybody, the US military industrial complex wins and everybody else loses. And also there was the USSR, because the USSR was a socialist, anti-religious, and it had lots of influence in the Middle East. And they said, what better way to destroy that than to promote religious extremism that's supposedly being suppressed by the USSR, even though it's not suppressed. It was just not in government. So, that's my answer to that question. Oh, but I want to add that since then, these ISIS, Al-Qaeda, not only have they been used as a tool to destroy nations that are on the list for destruction,
right,
but also they're being used as an excuse for war. And where that comes in is attacks against Europe and the US. And another thing in terms of what Israel is supporting Al-Qaeda, providing them medical aid and admitted as well weapons. And they said on record that they prefer ISIS victory in Syria than Assad victory. They created Hamas.
Yeah, I heard you on an interview. I was surprised that, this is well known. It was in Haaretz a long time ago. Haaretz, I think, pulled that article.
Did they?
But it was it was public. By the way, there was another back in 2011. The CFR posted an article, "The Specter of Al Qaeda in Syria," and the guy was calling for Al Qaeda in Syria, and the CFR has since pulled that article. Yeah.
I remember covering that article.
Yep.
And there was another one, The Good and Bad of Ahrar al-Sham, the Al-Qaeda that the US can befriend. I don't know if they pulled that one, but it was extensively covered. That was the CFR as well.
Wow, okay.
So they are pretty much out in the open with this stuff. in the paper, like in the white papers that they produce,
Right.
and in like the big articles, because it's very difficult to hide. But you don't hear it in the mainstream media, and
Yeah,
when you
and
say it in the mainstream media, they'll call you a conspiracy theorist.
exactly. I mean, you can quote the CFR, and they're going to call you a conspiracy theorist when they openly
Yeah.
write about how we need to arm Al Qaeda. It's ridiculous.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
This is crazy.
I think Brzezinski also said create microstates in the region. I think he says that either in Grand Chessboard. Yeah, I think he says it in Grand Chessboard. That the goal for that region is microstates.
Yeah, and the useful thing about microstates is if you were to, especially if that microstate was created with ethnocentric lines, if you're creating a country without like consideration for whether the area of that country can actually feed the people inside it, then you're going to have a situation where conflict is created. For example, in Syria, they want to cut off this area and make it a Kurdistan, where they want us to force us to inject federalism into our constitution and give the empowerment there. Basically, what they've done there is the majority, 20 out of 22 million people, that was the population before the war began. There was only 2 million Kurds, and not all of them live in the northeast of the country. So they wanted, the population of the Al-Haska region at the time was 1.6 million. They wanted to give 1.6 million people 86% of the oil that would be feeding 20 million people. And so you have this divide that's bound to create conflict. The same thing, when Britain drew up plans to create Kuwait. The reason that Kuwait even exists is not because of Babylon or Assyria that was the grounds for which creating Iraq, but because they wanted to prevent Iraq from getting a lot of area in Hormuz Strip. If you noticed, every single choke point where the Hormuz or where there's like a sea where you need to pass, a microstate is created. Look up the country called Djibouti. That is a classic example where a microstate was created just so that Britain or some superpower can control the boats and the trade in these routes.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why they want microstates.
Yeah, and in fact, it's funny too because Quigley, in his book Tragedy and Hope, that I covered the totality of in a bunch of lectures, he is writing from the CFR archives. He actually mentions in this very mainstream tome that the control of the Suez was a plan of the Rothschilds. So being sort of in the background of the British Empire, the British Empire has always understood that you need these little choke points, and you create the microstate there, like you said.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess Syria stands in the way of that for the fact that they have allowing Russian trade and boats to go through. Yeah. So they want to control the entire Mediterranean Sea.
That makes sense. Okay.
And there's nothing we can do about it, basically, at this point.
Well, I think
it's been foiled. Like the last several attempts to get rid of Assad didn't work because the mainstream media fake news about white helmets, for example, which I was going to ask you about. Like they even give these guys Oscars, and it's still it's not enough to work. It's not working.
I have video of the white helmet members literally torturing a Syrian soldier. We have multiple videos of them attending executions. We have video of them dancing around with Al-Qaeda flags. But the British government, and up until now the US government, are still giving them millions of dollars and giving them Oscars as well. So, the agenda is clear. Like, you could Google these videos. It's not even... Just Google a video of them winning an Oscar and a video of them killing people. You can find it on my channel. In fact, I juxtapositioned those two things, but it was actually the State Department talking about how great they are, juxtaposition with all the killing. So the White Helmets was created by this MI6 agent called, I think, James Lemessier. I think his name is James. And pumped with millions and millions of dollars to basically give Al Qaeda a nice face. I'm not saying that civilians haven't been injured during this war, but this group was specifically designed to push chemical weapons attack narratives. And I'm not saying that civilians didn't die in some of those chemical attack stories. I'm quite sure that the rebels and Al Qaeda are capable of civilians in order to try to get the US to intervene. In fact, Al Qaeda took over a chlorine factory in 2012 in Aleppo. And what is now they're now saying has been used in Syria, since they've dropped the sarin line, now they're saying it's chlorine. Well, they took the chlorine factory. I mean, it's quite obvious what's happening.
Yeah, it's obvious, right?
Yeah, well, and it's obvious because on the first, it wasn't actually the first attack. The first chemical attack that the US was told about was in August in 2013. But actually, the first one was in March in 2013. It was in Aleppo and not Damascus, and it was an attack against a Syrian government-controlled area where Syrian soldiers were among those killed. And the media said, oh, it's not a real attack. Actually, that's the irony. They said, oh, that time they said that wasn't a real attack. And then the Syrian government asked the OPCW to come in and investigate. Guess what happens on the first day that the OPCW arrives in Damascus? The big chemical attack in Ghouta. Now, why would the Syrian government invite people and then do a chemical attack on the day of their arrival? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the media actually addressed this because Ax Selstrom, the head of the OPCW at the time, who they now booted out, he was quite suspicious about that. And he mentioned it. He's like, why did this happen like hours within our arrival? It doesn't make any sense. And the media came up with a story about how Assad's brother secretly did it in order to do a coup attempt against him. And of course, none of that was true because you could still see his brother around with him. And they forgot about the story. So that has never been explained. And of course, it's because it's a false flag.
Yeah, it was fake. It reminds me of the fact that Foreign Policy magazine ran articles admitting that the CIA gave Saddam all the gases that he supposedly used against Iran. Yeah. And then that was the pretense for Saddam's destruction, as W said, right? He's got mustard gases. So the CIA is the one that supposedly gave Saddam the mustard gases.
Yeah, he was a CIA agent, actually. Right. That's how it started up.
Yeah.
But one thing that annoys me is that, as someone who is part of the alternative media, who's been doing this for a long time, we fought hard to prove, whenever we say anything is fake, there's always a mound of evidence to back that up. But these days, people are just shooting down truths by saying fake news without any effort to disprove it at all. I mean, there's one video that's been going around where these people in body bags one of them is scratching his nose, and they say, this is Hamas pretending that people died in Gaza, and look, they're scratching their nose. That video is actually from Egypt for a protest against ISIS.
Yeah.
So, that is, and they're the ones crying fake news, but they're the ones faking the fake news. So that's something that us in the alternative media, we have to fight, because for every conspiracy that we've exposed, we've had to be diligent in the fact checks that we've made. But for every conspiracy that the globalists and the neocons and the warmongers are claiming against us, they don't seem to have the same standard. No. They can say anything is fake.
Yeah, and this is quite clearly something drawn up like under maybe Cass Sunstein. If you read his paper on cognitive infiltration, he wrote about how to disrupt alternative media through creating fake news. He talked about this years ago in one of his papers. He was, I forget what his exact role under Obama was, but then I think he went to the NSA eventually. But he wrote this paper on conspiracy theories, alternative media, and cognitive infiltration. And it's all about how to combat this stuff, written several years ago. But then you start to see fake conspiracies promoted in the alternative media, which are obvious, just counterintelligence operations. But the fake news thing was an interesting kind of twist where it's another version of counterintelligence where they put that out there precisely to discredit alternative media. And the irony is that they are the greatest purveyors of fake news.
Indeed. And, maybe because the term conspiracy theory kind of went out of fashion, because the CIA made that to discredit people who legitimately were exposing conspiracy theories, conspiracies in the White House.
Exact same thing over again.
Yes, exact same thing. This is what, and we're trying to take this term fake news back from them. So it's become like a fake news war. Everyone's accusing each other of fake news, but only one side is actually being diligent about it and proving that there's fake news, and that's not the side that's pushing for war.
So Andy smeared himself in mayonnaise earlier today for shekels.
I did.
Is Syrian girl going to smear herself in mayonnaise and potato chips for money, or?
Let's see what the chat says.
What else you got?
Let's see what the chat says.
She's above.
What can?
I got about 100 donations in about a second.
I don't have any mayonnaise. I can eat another chip.
The money starts pouring in. Comes the money, dude.
But a chip's stuck in my throat from realizing that I was eating chips live. But,
yeah.
I wonder how far. When did we start going live? That's the frightening.
Now you're gonna get a hit piece in BuzzFeed. It'll be like junk food pig Syrian girl. I'm joking.
That would be the least of my worries. But yeah, no. If you want to do something for shekels, it's got to be silly, and I might just do it.
No. I mean, obviously, you don't have to rub yourself in mayo for shekels.
No. There's not going to be any mayo. There's not going to be any rubbing. So.
That's funny. That's crazy, man.
So what's the most hateful comment that you got? That's what.
Well, me and my ex co-host split recently, so a lot of people have said a lot of hateful things. Pretty bad.
Oh no! I mean,
you mean about you?
Our conversation. Is there any hate comments right now?
Okay, yeah. A few people think like most people like are intrigued and listening, but there are a few people who were like, oh, she's lying. What else? Like basically that you aren't being truthful.
Oh,
but
okay.
You'd have
you
to
didn't specify.
You'd have to. No, it's just like straight up. Yo,
fake
she's
news.
lying. Yeah, fake news, all that stuff. You'd have to obviously we'd have to have some specifics. I could go through. Jay, if you want, you could talk about something for a second. I'll grab the important questions for her right now and make a list, and we could do that if you want to do that.
Yeah, you do that, and I'll get a couple more questions here. So
sure, I'll start collecting them.
So one question I have for you is, you mentioned something about North Korea. I'm kind of skeptical about North Korea. I mean, I don't want to be overly conspiratorial, but to me, it just seems kind of ridiculous. I mean, there's a guy that I read who wrote a bunch of geopolitical books named Servando Gonzalez, and he did some great analyses of Castro. And I'm just going to get your idea on this, see what you think. And he argued that since the U.S. could have easily gotten rid of Castro if they really wanted to, he thinks that Castro was kind of allowed to be in the region as an excuse for the U.S. to continue to police that region. So I've just wondered, I've speculated, does North Korea kind of represent that? Is Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il, aren't they just kind of like allowed to do their thing? Because
honestly, I don't think so. I mean, I know someone who personally met Castro. I mean,
okay.
Like, I think that the Cuba thing was probably settled during the USSR.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the details about it, so I can't say exactly, but I think that there's not much evidence to support that theory. In terms of North Korea, again, I'm pretty like North Korea borders both China and Russia.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that the US is allowing North Korea to be there in order to police the countries around. I mean, no, China and Russia have a benefit from having a North Korea there. It's a very important peninsula. So again, like they don't need to have if North Korea didn't exist, they could just be spending more time demonizing Russia and China in the media. Why, why do they need a North Korea? They don't. So I'm going to disagree with that one.
Okay, but playing devil's advocate, what about China in the sense of, maybe I shouldn't have said the U.S. policing the area, but the U.S. functioning under the globalists to police the area, for example. So, and thus to allow these people to remain there. So, for example, like China. I mean, China. Don't you think China is at a meta level maybe a big part of globalism and the New World Order? I mean, they're allowed to retain their cultural identity, I think, because the globalists know that globalism wrecks cultures. And so if you want to allow China to maybe be built up as the future of the globalist order, but why have so many globalists said China is the future of the New World Order, if it wasn't part of the scheme?
You know, that is beyond me in terms of my level. I guess because you might be seeing it in an even bigger scale than I am. I'm still not there yet, so I can't comment on China and globalism. I can say that China's never attacked another country, but I do know that China has its own interests, and it's going into Africa. But every country has its own interests, and as long as it isn't forcing its interests down the barrel of a gun, I don't see that there's any problem with that, except, I realize there's a huge rivalry between China and the US, even more so than Russia and the US, because it's more economic with China. And China is certainly has its nefarious elements at times, I suppose. But at the end of the day, they're not, as long as they're staying within their own borders, as long as they're not invading someone to force them to do things, like, I really have nothing to say about that. It's really the wars that I have to talk about.
Right. What do you think about the thesis of like that the neocons intentionally want the clash of civilizations? Do you agree that that's what they're trying to do, to maybe to engineer a Western, quote, Christian civilization against Islamic civilization in an engineered clash of civilizations?
There's evidence of that, and I think maybe part of that is when you talk about West Christians. It seems like how there's sects in Islam, Shia, Sunni. There's also sects in Christianity, Orthodox, Catholic, and Protestant, Evangelical, and that seems to be the one that the U.S. the Zionist Christians in the U.S. they have no concern for the Christians in the Middle East at all. And they're happy to see them get wiped out. And probably that's because the Christians in the Middle East are inconvenient to the idea of a clash of civilizations. I mean, maybe we're actually seeing what would have been a clash of civilizations had Syria fallen. But since Syria is like one of the last secular states in the entire Middle East, it's kind of in the way, and that's why they want it to topple, because then they can have the clash of civilizations. And it's interesting that there's this pushback against refugees, but then even on the other side they say, but Christians are okay, let's let in the Christian refugees, that's fine. But in doing that, what's happening is that you're expediting the ethnic cleansing of Christians in the Middle East, because you're pulling them out faster than anyone else. So that's food for thought. So I think
I'm glad you mentioned evangelicalism and all that stuff. I mean, that was my background when I was growing up, so I'm very familiar with all that. But it was only later on that I learned that it was actually Oxford University and these weird sects in the UK that I think were supported by big money, probably the Rothschilds, that actually put out the Scofield Bible. And the Scofield Bible gave this new interpretation of Christian theology, which nobody ever held.
Judeo-Christianity?
Well, what I'm saying is that this specific Bible presented a new theology I have the Scofield Bible from back when I was a kid, but the idea was that now the church in Christian theology is supposed to kind of be the successor to what Israel is, but now that this new theology is no, it's actually still Israel, and you have to support the nation state of Israel. So what I'm getting at is that the British Empire was consciously, through Oxford Publishing, putting out this study Bible right before the Balfour Declaration and the eventual establishment of the nation state of Israel. So
it makes perfect sense, because during the Crusades, the state of Jerusalem was supposed to be controlled by Christians according to the Crusader mentality, and now that Christianity has been completely flipped over to no, we need Jewish control of Jerusalem. And it goes back to the Messianic prophecy. I mean, you mentioned Mecca, Britain controlling Mecca. Maybe there's an agenda to control the most important religious sites, but the Temple Mount, which they say is also the site of Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is a special mosque because it's supposed to be built on the site where the Prophet Muhammad met the angel Gabriel and gave him the prophecy. So that area is supposed to be also where the Messiah returns, because it's supposed to be the Mount, the Temple Mount of David, as far as I understand. So the Messianic prophecy is that if you can, for the Zionist Christian and the Zionist Jew, is that they want to control this area and the Messiah will come. And that will be the end of the world, the apocalypse. For the Christian Zionists, they believe that Messiah is going to be the Antichrist.
Right.
So, and they want the Antichrist to come. They want this fulfillment to happen so that Jesus will come. It's basically like they're trying to push this self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's interesting because ISIS also has this Messianic prophecy. I mean, they wanted to control Damascus because they believed if they could do that, the battle of the end of day is in a city nearby called Dabiq that they wanted to control, and they wanted their Messiah to come too, which for Muslims is Jesus. So but there's supposed to be an Antichrist that comes before him anyway. So there's these Messianic cults that are killing the people of the Levant, which happens to be Syrians and Palestinians, and they are a people that are kind of a bit more separate to the Gulf Arab people. They're a unique minority, you might say, that's just getting the brunt of everyone's Messianic prophecies on our land, from the Crusades to the Jews of the world to the ISIS of the world. Everyone wants a piece of us. So I think it's unfortunate that Christianity came from Levant, because it's come back to bite us in a way. And not just Christianity, I'm talking about all Abrahamic religions came from the Levant. So unlucky for us in some ways, but in other ways very good for us.